We continue the Cavaliers talk here on All Bets Are Off with Brendan Bowers of StepTheInRules.com. Check out his website for in-depth Cavaliers information. As I'm sure people will start to transition now more towards the Cavaliers. Before we get back into the calls, 866-786-8551 or Bruce at SportsTimeOhio.com. We had a tweet from Chucks93, kind of what you talked about earlier about Tristan Thompson being that pick at number 4 in the 2011 draft. You mentioned a couple of names from that draft that he also said, well, you know, maybe those would have been better picks. When do you think we can value or devalue that number 4 pick? Like, how many years down will we say, you know what, this pick was a bust? Or this pick was, you know, great because now he started to develop?
Well, I mean, I look at what he is going to be in the worst case. I mean, if he's going to be an energy guy that provides defense and you know, scores in and around, you know, 9 or 10 points a game, I mean, I don't think you can call him a bust if you look back at, like, you know, and call Dewan Wagner a bust. I mean, he's not in the same class of bust, you know, as compared to, you know, even Greg Oden, you know, there's something like that. So, I mean, you know, could you look back and say that he should have taken Kenneth Faried? Maybe you can say that now. But Kenneth Faried went 22nd, and 21, you know, other teams passed on him too. Well, I guess not
sure.
Exactly that.
Well, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the hard part. You want so much out of him, but you got to remember, he was your second first-round pick. So you're getting everything you want out of Kyrie Irving, where you have more of a leeway to say, you know what, that 2011 draft will never really be a bust because you have the best player out of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, the bust conversation would be if the Cavaliers took Derek Williams or did that thing where they people wanted them to draft Derek Williams and Brandon Knight from you know, Detroit. I mean, if you want to do something like that, that's a bust. You know, with getting Tristan Thompson 4 and Kyrie Irving 1, you're okay.
We had a couple of tweets that came in that wanted to ask you a couple of questions as well. First, Rick Williams says, the Miami Heat would be unbeatable if they were able to get Anderson Varejao and have him crash the boards. Do you think they have any draft picks or players that the Cavaliers would want?
No. I mean, I don't think they do. They would be very, very good, though, with Anderson Varejao in that lineup. You know, they don't really have any, you know, Norris Cole's a nice young player, but, I mean, if you're trading Anderson Varejao, I want a lottery pick back for him and a solid young player in the NBA right now already. If I'm Chris Grant, before I'm, you know, answering the phone, I mean, that's what I want to be talking about, and I don't see the Heat. They don't have the player part of that. So I don't.
I think we're a little spoiled too because of the pick where you trade away Mo Williams and all of a sudden you're able to land Kyrie Irving. People think, you know, like that's easy to do. You just, you know, snap your fingers and you get that lottery pick for another guy. This is DJ Lupo B says the Cavs should trade Andy for LeBron, aka don't trade Anderson at all. Then we have Lewis says, did the Cavs need another scorer to go along with Kyrie?
I think that they do. I think that that's a good question. And while I think Waiters could improve as a scorer, I'm not sure that he's going to be that number 2 guy. If I'm going into this draft, I'm looking for a scorer. I'm looking for a number 2 scorer. And maybe that guy ends up being the number 3 scorer, and Waiters is 2. But yes, I think they need another scorer.
And Jamie in Louisville, I think we've already touched on your email a couple of times about what kind of value you can get back for Anderson Varejao. But I wanted to make sure you knew that we had your email in hand. Let's head out to Barberton. And Brian, you're up. Brian, how are you? Talking Cavs with Brendan Bowers.
Very good. How are you?
Good.
Hey, I think the Cavs' record is a little deceiving, too. They lost a couple buzzer beaters. They had some injuries, and they need some depth. When the second, cause they lost some points, you know, when the second team comes in and then Byron has to make interchanges. But I think Byron Scott's probably our best coach since Lenny Wilkins.
Yeah, and you know, the record may not prove it, Brian, thank you for the call. But what kind of we were talking about earlier, you know, the leadership, the development, the rings, you know, that has an impression on the younger guys that he has in that locker room.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, we'll be having a different conversation about Byron Scott, I feel like, next year. Next year will be, okay, now we've built. Did you win? Are you winning? You know, where are we going in the win-loss column? But I really feel like that's next year's conversation. and you can't really judge it by the same criteria as you'd be judging them this year.
And I think Brian brings up a good point, too, about the bench. You know, Omar Caskey was brought in last year. He struggled since he's put on the uniform. C.J. Miles has been up and down this year. You know, Daniel Gibson, same thing. He's had some injuries to deal with. Just give your thoughts on the Cavaliers bench.
I mean, it's not really, you know, it's not a good bench. I mean, it's not a bench. It's the bench of a team that's 7-23. But you know, and I'm not necessarily here to defend Byron Scott, but when people say he should have done his rotation this way or that way, I mean, who are you going to put in exactly? Like, who is going to go in at this other time that something different's going to happen? I mean,
right.
That bench needs to improve. You know, in addition to the draft and exploring the trade market for Anderson Varejao, they need to go attack free agency completely different than they did this past summer. This past summer, they, you know, essentially filled out their roster, re-signed Alonzo G, brought in C.J. Miles at a reasonable number, but next year they're going to have a lot of money to spend, and they're going to need to get talent. They're going to need to bring in a front line caliber player and build that bench. That bench has to also be better. You know, we can talk about Tristan Thompson and Deion Waiters, you know, as much as we want, but that bench needs 2, 3, you know, more quality players on it.
And I think that's where we're going to see, you know, Dan Gilbert with his ownership group and everyone else use Kyrie as your focal point and try to bring in those guys and sell the potential next lottery pick as well as, hey, you know, join this roster that we already have going forward. George in Tiffin. George, you're up. How are you today?
Fine. Gene and Brandon, happy holidays.
You too, George.
I'd like to make a few comments. I enjoyed what Brandon was saying about Anderson Varejao. I have to be a real fan of his, and the way the team is playing, you know, it's catch and catch can, and Varejao really adds a lot to the team, and I absolutely don't see anybody in the league that they can deal for that's going to give them what Anderson can give them. He's 30 years old. He's still in his prime. He's got another 3 years, I think. And I also like the way that the coach is doing. He's doing a super job with these young guys. Another thing I wanted to mention is the fact that you're looking for a big guy next year, maybe to supplement Waiters, or not Waiters, but Zeller. Let's get his brother. He is dynamite.
Well, and Jordan, no, thank you very much. And the way the Cavaliers are going, you know, they might have that potential of drafting Cody Zeller next season, but you know, with only almost 30 games in, it's a little too early, I think, to talk draft. But one thing that he mentioned, Anderson Varejao, 30, potentially, you know, 3 more, maybe 4 more good years in him. How many playoff appearances do the Cavaliers have in that 3 to 4 year window?
Well, I guess you gotta look at it one year at a time, maybe.
Sure.
And you know, if you could, you know, go out and bring in a couple free agents, and you could, you know, add some talent in the draft, you know, they could be a playoff team maybe next year. You know, with Anderson Varejao, you know, on that lineup. So I think that you kind of look at it right there and see, you know, where to go. At least let him finish out his contract here in Cleveland, and then just see what the market says.
Joe in